Got to.
Well, let's get started.
Well, of course, I grew up in St. Augustine. I was born in Jacksonville on board a houseboat. We went to St. Augustine from Jacksonville when I was 2 or 3 weeks old, and I grew up there, lived on Saragossa Street. My early childhood was, I guess, I played in Sanchez Boatyard and various boatyards on the San Sebastian River, and was spent a lot of time around Corbett's Dock on it's now the restaurant.
Where was that located? That was on San Sebastian?
No, the boatyard, Sanchez.
Perfect Star.
Huh?
You talked about with the restaurant.
The restaurant, the one that's there now.
Santa Maria.
Santa Maria.
On the bay
Santa
side.
Maria was Corbett's fish and oyster and shrimp dock.
And the Sanchez, as you mentioned, was that related to Billy Sanchez? There was a boat builder named Billy Sanchez when I was a kid.
Probably.
Lived out on Sanchez
Probably.
Avenue.
Sanchez Boatyard was down almost to Flagler Hospital on the river.
Okay, on Riberia.
On the Matanzas River.
Mm-hmm.
They had two railways there, and they had a shed for building boats. Dad had a little boat named the Marie that was built there. She was, at one time, the Marie was a shrimp boat. She was a mail boat that served from St. Augustine to Summer Haven. She was changed into a party fishing boat to take out fishing parties. When Daddy finally sold the Marie, she was sold to Carver Harris, who was a very dear friend of Daddy.
Sold the Marie.
And after that, Dr. Lockwood bought it. And
Dr. Lockwood.
Dr. Vernon Lockwood, who was, I guess, the best-known doctor in St. Johns County for many years.
Yes, he was well known.
He took the Marie to the Keys, and he used to commute by train on weekends when he wanted to go fishing. The last time I saw that boat was after the big hurricane in '62, I think it was.
Dorothy?
Yeah.
64.
64. 60. It's one of the big hurricanes in the early 60s. It had to be after 62. My territory went all the way to Key West in those days, and on one of my trips to the Keys, soon after the hurricane, the Marie was across the highway in the tops of some trees.
Oh,
So,
my goodness.
I guess she never was salvaged.
No. In a treetop, huh?
Yeah. The waterfront in St. Augustine actually was the pleasure waterfront basically was from Fort Marion, if you will.
And that would be now the
Castellio di San Marcos.
Yeah.
To Sanchez Boatyard, down by the hospital. The city pier was there. When I was a boy, the city pier was, the dock master was a man named Bennett or Benet, who was an ardent sport fisherman. He, I think at one time, held the tarpon record. Of course, back in those days, we used to catch tarpon in the river and in the inlet, the old inlet. The Corbett's Dock was the commercial shrimp dock on the waterfront.
And there were a lot of shrimp fleets back then.
Yeah, there was many shrimp boats there. There was many fleets. There was Salvador's had a fleet, Poley had a fleet, John Sanders had a fleet. My dad had one or two or three boats at different times.
Versailles.
Huh?
Versailles.
Versailles had a shrimp boats. Arthur Fagan had shrimp boats. Many other people that I can't even remember had shrimp.
So there was a lot of fleets in what we're talking about around the 50s and 60s?
No, we're talking about the 30s.
30s, okay.
I started school in '32, so actually I was growing up on the waterfront in the late 20s. And I was born in 25, and by the time I was 4 or 5 years old, I was on the waterfront with my father and various other people that were waterfront type people. And all those had rowboats or sailboats, and Dad always had a little skiff, a little fishing skiff. We used to, in his spare time, we used to go up North River and fish mackerel, bluefish. And a Sunday outing back in those days was Mother would go to church, Grace Church, and after church we'd all wander down to the Corbus dock and take the skiff out and go to Bird's Island. Bird Island is now Conch Island. When I was a boy, Bird Island was a very, very small piece of land that was almost covered with water at low tide.
And that's where the birds all would come in when it wasn't submerged, of course.
Right, it was covered with birds when it wasn't submerged, and Salt Run was a very small indenture in the coast. One of the interesting things about Salt Run is that off the coast in the ocean at Salt Run is 2 or 3 wells, artesian wells, that you can, on smooth days in the ocean, you can see them boil up out of the ocean, and you can actually
I can remember that. There was some on Valana Beach too, wasn't there?
I've never seen the ones at Valana. The ones at Valana Beach are probably the well that used to serve the
Steamer they had out there?
the great big Olympic pool they used to have up there. Can't think of the name of it, but it was a big building, and it had a terrific sized pool, and every year the ocean would reclaim more beach, and finally the pool got washed away and it was torn down. It was
I can't remember, I'm
So
sorry.
was that the one that's not the one that went out in the hurricane in the late 20s, is it?
No.
The big casino that was down further down?
This
No.
was across the road from Fiddler Spring.
It's if you keep going straight when you come off of North Bridge and go
Yeah.
to the ocean, it was right
It's right
on the
there.
ocean.
Mm-hmm.
The casino. We used to swim there. In fact, I think our 9th grade class had a big class picnic there the last time I went there. That I can remember that the pool was still all there. North Beach, of course, didn't have a bridge at various times. Twice in my lifetime, the bridge burned. It burnt, I think, from the east end the first time, and they replaced it with a concrete portion, and then the next time it burnt from the draw towards St. Augustine. So we finally got after many years, we finally got a decent concrete bridge.
Now we're going to have a high-rise bridge over there.
Yes, that's one of the very few bridges left in the state of Florida. It's a lift span.
Oh, really?
There's very, very few lift spans left in the state of Florida. And one of the most famous lift spans that we, no, I'm wrong. I was going to say one of the most famous lift spans in the world is the bridge in London, but it's not a lift span. That's a permanent fixed top with a small drawbridge. Shands Bridge was a drawbridge when I was a boy.
I can remember
It
that when I
burned.
was small. It was awful.
Yeah, it was burned.
And
It was crooked.
It went out 2 miles,
Yeah,
and the boards would flap when you
Right.
went over it, and the rail was wooden.
yeah.
It was a nightmare.
That
Someone who
was-
can't stand bridges.
That was a real.
And it was just skim the top of that water, and at high tide, it was kind of threatening.
It was a real adventure to try to fish under the chance bridge
Oh,
because
yes,
it was so
was.
close to the water, but it was
Yeah.
good fishing. And you'd see people day and night casting lines under the bridge. Same thing on North Bridge. It was always good fishing on North Bridge
Yeah,
when it was a wooden bridge.
What fish out there, some?
A big outing when I was a boy was to go to North Beach on the Victory the Second, and you'd go in the pavilion, which is now Oscars, and it wasn't fully enclosed at that
Yeah,
time.
Museum Fish Camp and.
Usena's North Beach, and you'd go in the pavilion and find a place for your picnic lunch, and leave it, and then you'd catch the little horse car over to the beach, fight the horse flies, the mosquitoes, and the gnats, the ants, and
Lovely outing at the beach.
well, you know, you got to put up with a little inconvenience. But that was a big day. You'd go to the beach and swim and get good and sunburned and come back to the pavilion, and Mother'd put vinegar on you, and
Smelled like a tossed salad for a while.
yeah, or rub aloe on you. The girls liked the aloe because it didn't smell bad. The boys liked the vinegar because the girls left you alone. And
So that was a good preventative back in for
go.
a young guy who wasn't interested in girls yet.
well, you know how it is. They're superfluous until they blossom.
When you said that you all lived on Saragossa, what part was that? Was that your family that lived
My
down there?
great-grandmother bought the house on Saragossa in the early 20s at 45. She built a smaller house on the back corner of the lot for my father and mother and my brother and I when I came along. My father was raised by his grandma. His mother died when he was very young. And he came to Florida with his great-grandmother,
And what was his grandmother's name?
Mary Marie Maier. She and her husband was in the chemical business in New Jersey, and she came to St. Augustine as a snowbird. She was originally from Bavaria. Her and her husband came over as immigrants from Bavaria to New York. Somehow got into the assay business, and chemical business. Ended up building a plant in Jersey. Grandmother brought my father to St. Augustine on her winter visit. She usually rented a place on Palm Road, and for a couple of years they rented a place on Charlotte Street, 332 or
235.
235 Charlotte Street. This was in 21 and
20.
20 and 21, 22.
There were two children.
Mother came to St. Augustine as a nurse in training for Flagler Hospital in 1917 or 16. She was in nurses training at the old Flagler nurses quarters down.
It was like a wooden building that was right on the waterfront,
Yeah.
separate from the hospital.
Yeah, it was a separate building.
Yeah.
As I understand, they had more than one building for the nurses, for residency. Of course, the hospital burned at one time, and we've never been able to really find out what they did after it burned. We're still looking into that. But as you know, as time as the war progressed, my father volunteered for the Navy in World War I from St. Augustine with a request for overseas service. He was a qualified pilot. Back in those days, a a boat pilot was sort of a, um, honorary thing. You made money by piloting boats, missing sandbars basically, finding the channel that wasn't marked, remembering where the inlet was last week. He was qualified to pilot from Charleston to Key West at 16 years old. And the Navy, in their wisdom, decided to station him on an SP boat in St. Augustine after he went through boot camp training in Key West. His boot camp in Key West was the Rough House, the yacht named Rough House. As I understand it, it was a houseboat type yacht that was given to the Navy by the Matheson family of Matheson, Hamilton, and Dade County. The SP boat that Dad was on was named the Marguerite. She was stationed in St. Augustine. I understand she was not the only SP boat there, but they were sub patrols and that sort of thing. And I guess Dad was fortunate. He was stationed at home during the war, but yet he was on his duty consisted of piloting various Navy boats from various points north to Charleston to points south.
Was he stationed here in St. Augustine or over like the naval base at Green Cove or
St. Augustine.
off right out?
There was not a base in St. Augustine. It was the SP boats, the patrol boats, were, as I understand it, used the old city pier for their headquarters. There was quite a contingent of Navy people in St. Augustine during World War I. Of course, you know, the old story, mother and dad got married, and mother never did work at being a nurse. She kept pretty busy keeping us boys bandaged up. 3 boys will keep you busy. And Dad went back in World War II as a Navy volunteer. At the time my father went in, at the time I went in the Navy in World War II as a volunteer in 1942. My brother was missing in action. My father was in service, and we were living then in New Smyrna. My older brother, Robert F. Jr., was one of the first casualties from St. Augustine in World War II. He was on a destroyer that was a year old, the USS Ingraham, DD-444, which sunk in 25 seconds in the North Atlantic off of Newfoundland. At the time, we were told it was a collision. Years later, I had a retired Navy captain in my outfit, and through him, after you could get information, we found that it was a collision between 2 Navy ships in convoy during a sub alert, and most all hands were lost. When a brand new destroyer sinks in 25 seconds, there's not much left.
Not much left.
And in those days, in the first part of the war, depth charges were set to go off on contact. They hadn't learned yet to set them when they fired them to go off underwater. The waterfront in St. Augustine has always been a hotbed of activity, really, for the kids. We had regular things we did all the time. We swam down by the hospital. We swam up
Right in the bayfront.
Right in the bayfront. We swam over off of Fisher's Island. We swam in the San Sebastian River. One of our big things in the San Sebastian River was to swim from one bridge to the other. The old railroad bridge to the San Sebastian Bridge.
And when you lived on Saragossa Street, US 1 was not there, so the street went straight into the marsh.
That's right. Saragossa Street was not there. The railroad was east of where it is now. And at Orange Street, where Orange Street ran into Malaga Street, there was a railroad trestle across a creek that was our white clay pit. We used to go dig white clay down there.
Really?
And that was the camp for the hobos.
Oh, okay.
And
Tell them a hobo story.
I used to spend a lot of time down there listening to the hobos. Of course, the hobos back in those days were not bums. Most of them were pretty well educated, and most of them were pretty honorable people. But there was no employment, and no
they lived on the
welfare as we
train.
know it today, and no handouts, and no supplemental security income, and no Social Security, and no county welfare and state welfare, and veterans' pensions weren't hadn't come to the front yet. Most of them, a lot of them were World War I veterans. There was always something going on down there. They always
they
had
used
a
to
fire
tell y'all
going and making a stew and telling stories and smoking hand-rolled cigarettes. And I couldn't do them much good on the cigarettes. Nobody in my family smoked, so I couldn't find tobacco for them. But I used to snitch a little chewing tobacco once in a while for my great uncle and take it down there. Our family consisted, when I was growing up on Saragossa Street, our family consisted of my great-grandmother, my great-uncle, my mother and father, my older brother, and myself, and after 1935, my younger brother. My older brother was born in St. Augustine, my younger brother was born in St. Augustine. I just happened to be born in Jacksonville when Dad had his boats in Jacksonville. We still have pictures of one of the old boats Daddy had that went ashore on the beach, the Jim Dozier. The skipper couldn't find the inlet, northeaster, and the boat was leaking badly, and the only thing he had left was to put it on the beach.
And those were days when we had real northeasters.
Oh, yes, we really had northeasters. Northeasters were fun.
Well, they always got me out of school for 3 days, so.
Yeah, and we all, and
I really enjoyed Northeasters. September was a good month.
I headed for the bayfront in the Northeasters, and I spent the day rowing people across Bay Street.
I was going to say, did you row up and down the street?
Yeah, I used to always get one of Dad's rowboats from Corbett's Dock, and I'd row people across Bay Street.
Kind of like the younger ones now that take their rope to the beach and pull the...
Well, and as we got older, we did that. We used to have the cut downs on the beach, and we'd let the air out of the tires.
Back when we used to have sand dunes.
That's right. That's when we had sand dunes. That's when the beach at St. Augustine Beach was a quarter of a mile wide.
And you could really enjoy the beach. It wasn't overcrowded back then.
That's right. You could camp on the beach. You could build a fire on the beach. You could fish on the beach. You could park on the beach at high tide. Your car wouldn't be washed away. You'd have to park up near the sand dunes. When I was a boy, the road wasn't complete all the way to Matanzas. A1A was not complete all the way to Matanzas. Most of it was dirt. And in fact, it was a lot easier to get Matanzas by boat than it was by car.
Well, and would y'all ever go, when we were kids, we would go when they catch some fish and fry it right there on the beach?
Oh yeah, we used to take an iron pot with grits in it, and take some grease, and if we had money at that time, we'd buy a pound or two of tub butter, and we'd go to the beach and catch the mullet and clean them and cook them right there on the beach, and have lots of grits and mullet.
Best way to eat them, fresh right off
Right.
out of the ocean. You don't do that much because you can't find mullet anymore.
Well, the river's full of mullet here. The river's full of mullet here, but I don't like black mullet.
Is that freshwater?
Yeah, I don't
mullet.
like black mullet.
don't
I like
think I've ever eaten
ocean
it.
mullet. I like silver mullet.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever eaten that.
River mullet just have a muddier taste.
They stay close to the
Yeah.
mullet.
Well, mullet are vegetarian, so they're not, mullet are not a scavenger, they're vegetarian.
See, we knew there was a good reason why we grew up on mullet.
Well,
People will say, ooh, mullet. I said, man,
let's face it,
No.
let's face it, if it hadn't been for the woods and the river and the ocean, lots of people in St. Augustine wouldn't have had anything to
wouldn't
eat.
survive.
It was, money was very scarce, employment was very, very, intermittent.
You had no idea that you bought fresh fruits and vegetables from the store.
Yeah.
Well, when you grew up that way, it was a good time though.
Oh.
You didn't, it wasn't like you weren't as prosperous as people would think they are nowadays. It was just your way of life and it was great.
I didn't realize that money was very important until after I went in the service. Money was just something that you didn't have much of, but it really wasn't necessary. Most everybody had a good place to live, and I guess, not being a child, I didn't know who owned what.
Didn't really matter a lot of times.
Didn't matter, and transportation was no problem. St. Augustine was so small you could ride a bicycle anywhere you wanted to,
Yeah,
and a lot of people that worked at the railroad offices walked to work,
yeah.
or rode bicycles.
So the railroad office was a big thing then too. Of course, Henry Flagler was big, to bring the railroad in, but even when I was a kid, I can remember the passenger train.
Oh, yeah.
And it was used an awful lot, and a lot of places depended on the railroad.
Well, the biggest place of employment in St. Augustine was the railroad, Miller shops. Down right at the end of Saragossa Street, across Malaga Street, was a railroad maintenance facility where they repaired boxcars and things like that. And one of Daddy's friends he was in the Navy with was one of the people who worked there, Bobby Connors. And then the railroad station was right north of the northernmost office building. Boy, we're running out of time.
We're at Palmport, and we're visiting with Walter Maier.
Maier.
And he's showing us some of the pictures of his family and talking about your life that's centered around the water. This one, we're going to look at this for just a minute if we can come in. And this was your mother.
This is my mother, my older brother that was killed in action. This was aboard the Marie. I was about 2.5 there, so that makes it about 1927.5. Notice the beaded hat. Just what we need, beaded hats again.
A very nice picture. Your life centered mostly around water.
Right.
And we have one here of your mother and you, and you're on a boat here.
We're on one of our little skiffs. This is on one of our trips out to Bird Island. I've got my little sailboat in my lap, my little model sailboat. I guess I was about 6 there. That's about 1932.
We were talking a little bit earlier about some of the boats that centered around your life.
Huh?
And this was the
That's the Marie.
this was the Marie. Now, who built this?
This was the Marie. She was a day fishing boat there. This is the same boat as the mail boat that went from St. Augustine to Summer Haven and stopped on the way delivering mail. This is the same boat as a shrimp boat. That's the boat we spoke of earlier.
Now this was, this boat saw many phases of life, right?
That's right. This boat. Now this boat, if you can see it, is actually almost an exact replica of the Victory II. It's still running in St. Augustine.
That's owned by the Uvinas.
They were built by the same people, built in the same yard. This boat is 26 feet long. The Victory is, I imagine the Victory is 60 feet long at least. But this was one of the favorite designs, V-bottom, cypress planking, oak, and heart pine keel, oak ribs.
And we were talking at one time about how your family, you grew up in St. Augustine. Where did you go to school in St. Augustine?
I went to Orange Street School. I started Orange Street School in, I think, 1932. I went to junior high, which was on the 7th and 8th grade, which was on the west end of the same building. In the middle of the school, in the middle of the building that's still there, was a double stairway coming up from the street. That was D.D. Corbett's office, the superintendent of public instruction, and the principal's office. When you really got serious about school, you went down the street a block and you went to Catalina's.
Now, when we're talking about Orange Street School, that's now where the school board complex is.
I guess
The
it
same
is.
building, so you had the front stairs that went up and the principal's office was right there.
The principal's office was on one side and the superintendent of public instruction's office on the other side. When I was a boy, Mr. D.D. Corbett was the superintendent of public instruction, and across the hall was a man named Hatcher. He was a German man, had a very short haircut, very Germanic, was principal. After he wasn't principal any longer, Mrs. Carrier was principal.
And then when you graduated from one end of the building to the other end of the building, then you went down the street to Catalina's High School.
That's right. You started the 9th grade in Catalina's, 9, 10, 11, 12 in Catalina's. Back in those days, the football people changed their clothes and took showers in the basement on the west side under the junior high classes. And on the east side in the basement was the cafeteria for the grammar school.
Now, this was all in the Orange Street School
That's
building.
right,
So they went over there to take their showers for football.
That's right.
And then the football field was it then at Francis Field?
The football field was the great big open space owned by Mrs. Catalina's that ran from where the Civic Center is now to Riberia Street, and later on they built Francis Field there. When I was a boy, there was 2 or 3 softball diamonds out there, and the girls used to play softball, and the older guys used to play softball, and that's where the football team practiced. We just didn't have the facilities. In fact, we really didn't have enough uniforms for practice and for games at one time. Of course,
So
with a
you
name
practiced that afternoon, you had to wash them before you could play the game.
with a name like the
Where was
Mullet,
that?
what can you expect?
Yeah. That was the Catalina's Mullets. I've read
That's right.
that.
The highlight of our football season was playing some of the teams around close by, Palatka, various ones, and I think it was Live Oak that every year used to win. Nobody seemed to be able to beat Live Oak.
Like now, I think their big rival at St. Augustine High is Palatka.
Yeah,
And I guess they've been rivals for many years then.
that's right. When we were teenagers, before we went into service, we used to get a car full of boys and go to Palatka and chase the girls, and the guys from Palatka come to St. Augustine and chase our girls. We weren't smart enough to go on the same night.
So they were there waiting for you, and you
Yeah,
were there waiting for them.
we'd always have problems because we went on the night that they were home, and they came to our St. Augustine on the night we were home.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That's when our skating rink was in the YMCA gymnasium on Riberia Street.
Iberian Valencia?
Yep, right. It was the YMCA on Valencia that faced Valencia, and then behind the YMCA building was the enclosed pool that was fed by artesian well, and you swam nude.
Oh, boy.
And behind that was a gymnasium, a wooden frame gymnasium building, and in front of the gymnasium building on Riberia Street was a pool with a roof over it, and the artesian water would come in there, and it would go up in the air and would aerate it so that the sulfur smell would leave it,
Yeah.
and then it went into the pool.
Oh, very good. And then you went skating in the gymnasium?
The YMCA opened up a skating rink there. I worked there for a long period of time in the skating rink. I spent a lot of time at the YMCA. Mr. McGee, Warren McGee, was director of the YMCA at the time. Mr. Fox from the railroad, who lived on Saragossa Street, sponsored my membership in the YMCA. YMCA was sort of like headquarters for swimming and skating and working in the shop, and they even had a two alley bowling alley in the
basement?
in the YMCA on the ground floor,
Yeah.
under the porch.
What was the Civic Center used for? That's what's now the Information Center. But what was that used for back in those days?
The Civic Center was built by the WPA, as I remember it. Of course, I think it was just used for civic sponsored dances and concerts and card games and that sort of thing. Of course, the most popular card game in town was played in the old slave market every day. It played checkers and cards. All the old citizens, all the older male citizens would meet and play checkers and cards in what we used to call the old slave market.
And the fort? Did you play over at the
The
fort?
fort was wide open when I was a boy. It was not sponsored by the National Park Service. It was wide open. We used to camp on the top deck. We used to put live fish in the moat, so that we used to put little baby sharks.
I was going to say, I heard
Fish
tales
in
of
the
sharks
boat, in the
swimming
boat.
around in the moat. I remember that.
Of course, back in those days, we could eat oysters out of the river.
True. You could just go look.
The river wasn't polluted.
Well, I would say that despite the fact that you and even I grew up without television, there was a lot to do and enjoy yourself in St. Augustine as a kid growing up.
That's
As
right.
was probably a lot of small towns.
Well, we didn't have a radio. I can remember when we didn't have a radio. And I can remember sitting around the radio at my grandmother's house before we got a radio. It was an old Philco. And then she got an Atwater Kent, which was the Cadillac of radios in those days. And we got the Philco, and I can remember everybody being quiet to listen to Lowell Thomas and Fibber McGee and Molly and Amos and Andy, and it was just good entertainment. You visited with the family while you listened to the radio. Dad knitted nets, And I laid on the floor and drew pictures and tried to learn how to make boat plans. It was just simple, a way of life. In fact, to this day, I'm not a television fan because I would rather do something else than watch television. I'd rather read. I'd rather work in my garage. I'd rather do something else.
Well, we were talking about earlier about the water and the way things were in the marsh was in San Sebastian, backed up, not so terribly far from well, really Liberia, I guess. It wasn't so far from that. Malaga. Did you spend a lot of time down on the? Was it real marshy then, or
It was
were you
marshy.
able to go out into the
It
water
was marshy.
there?
It wasn't very deep in many places, but there was a lot of fish. There was fish, and being like all little boys, we'd get a piece of roofing tin and some tar, and we'd build a little tin boat. We'd go fishing, and we used to go marsh hen hunting. We used to kill marsh hens in the stormy weather. When the tide was high, we used to go marsh hen hunting.
There was a certain time of year that's marsh hen season, right?
Northeast season.
Northeast season, and when the water comes up over the marsh, and you can see the marsh.
And many times, Dad would take the Celeste. That's one of our boats, the Celeste. And we'd take the Celeste and we'd put 10 or 12 rowboats on board and get 2 or 3 hunters per boat, and we'd go down way up North River and anchor and take the rowboats, and it'd be 2 or 3 people in every rowboat, and we'd go marsh hen hunting. And then at the end of the day, we'd come back to the big boat, and we'd load up the boats, come back home. It was people actually ate marsh hens and enjoyed
They
them.
could see one. In fact, one of the young girls that I work with now doesn't believe there's such a thing. She thinks that's one of our tails.
Marsh chickens. They're good.
When you grew up, and you were saying that you grew up with your great grandmother and that, your grandmother. Were there any tales that they used to tell you? Some of them a little bit far out to get your kids to.
Well, of course, my old Uncle Tony was a real spinner of tales. He was I always thought he was a bachelor, but later on in life I found out he was married, and they separated during World War I and just went different ways. No children. He was a real spinner of tales of every kind. Bob Quigley, who lived down at Matanzas on a little boat named the Sandfly, was quite a spinner of tales. Bob Quigley was a tugboat captain for Henry Flygrew when they were building the Overseas Railroad.
Oh.
And my great uncle, used to race automobiles when he was young. He used to race Mercers and Franklin and another Overland.
And where did they race?
That was in New Jersey and Indianapolis.
Daytona 500 back
Well,
then,
no,
huh?
they didn't have Daytona 500 then. The Daytona 500 was the 500 local boys that used to chase each other around the beach on motorcycles. But we did have Sir Malcolm Campbell.
Oh, yeah.
Sir Malcolm Campbell came over from England and established 2 or 3 records at Daytona Beach. I had the privilege of meeting Sir Campbell. I had the Bluebird the second. I think it was the second. He made a world record of 351 miles an hour on Daytona Beach. I had the privilege of meeting him. My uncle introduced me. Also, a few years ago, I was in England, and we made a side trip to his home in England, up in the Lake District, and saw the lake that he established his speed record on.
Ooh.
So it was sort of a finish to the start of meeting a famous personality and when I was a boy. Another thing that was very interesting when I was a boy was you could get on a train in Chicago, and you could stay in that same Pullman coach and end up in Havana.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
In Havana?
In Havana, because you could they in Jacksonville they changed the coach to the Florida East Coast Railroad, and you would go down the coast of Florida, across the 7 Mile Bridge, down through the Keys into Key West, and the train would back up on the ferry, and the ferry would take off and go to Havana, and then you could party in Havana from your own private car if you had one, or a Pullman, and 2 or 3 days later, or a day later, whenever you could get back, and they put the train back on the boat, and bring it back to Key West, and you come up the East Coast with the Florida East Coast Railroad.
So when they ever say they traveled to Havana by train, they really did,
Right.
yeah.
Of course, they do the same thing in Europe now with the under the Channel Tunnel, the Channel as they call it. And they of course, from England to France for many years, and England to the Low Country, they had ferries that carried trains and cars.
But they never dug a tunnel underneath the ocean to get to Havana, did they?
No, no. Don't think that the subsurface in that area would. We do have a tunnel in Florida.
Oh, do we?
We have a very short tunnel in Fort Lauderdale under the New River on US 1.
Oh, really?
It's really not a tunnel. It's concrete boxes that are anchored to the bottom of the river. They dug a trench, sunk concrete boxes, connected them, anchored them, and in the middle of, they've got on one side they got a terrific machine for pumping air in and out,
Yeah.
and they have pumps running continuous, but that was an experimental tunnel, the
And
only
they
one
warn
in
you
Florida.
before you get on that, right? So I won't get on that by mistake and have a claustrophobic attack.
Well,
when I'm under
the only way you
water.
can drive US 1 through Fort Lauderdale is go through the tunnel.
Well, I've never been down that far, so I won't worry about it. When we were talking about growing up around St. Augustine and around the Sargasso area, which would be by the ball field, and that, spend a lot of time over in the ball field as kids. Did y'all play ball over there?
I was not a ball
You were
playing
more.
type person. I spent a lot of time over in the open area over there. When I was a boy, there was trenches over there, sort of. They were about 2.5, 3 feet deep. I think they were dug at one time in preparation to build a building. Was never built, and we used to play in the trenches, and we used to climb trees.
Play in the cemetery.
It was always things to do, climbing trees and fishing and hunting. Of course, the first day of hunting season in high school, it was nobody there. All the big boys were hunting.
Even back then, huh?
Even Mr. Crookshank's son was out hunting the first day of hunting season.
First day of hunting season was even big back then.
It was big. It was November. It was in November, and everybody that was anybody went hunting.
So the girls were the only ones left in school.
Girls and the boys that didn't care to hunt. I had my first rifle when I was about 6. I had a .22 rifle, and the next thing I had for hunting, I had a .410 shotgun. My family always had hunting equipment. Guns were not anything except a hunting.
Yeah, just used to.
It wasn't. They weren't toys.
What did you hunt besides marsh hens?
We hunted marsh hens and ducks. We hunted squirrels, dove, quail, hog, bear, deer.
Deer, you found bear around?
Bear, yeah. There's a lot of bear in 12 Mile Swamp. 12 Mile Swamp was full of little black bear, hog
Now,
bear.
12 Mile Swamp would be north of St. Augustine?
It's where they're building the new PGA complex.
Golf, so that's where 12 Mile Swamp.
That's
And
12
there was
miles.
a lot of bear in there?
There was a lot of bear in there. There
Big
was
bears or little bears?
most of the bears in that part of the country are, it's one small bear we call hog bear, a small, stocky bear, and you have a black bear that's a little bigger. There was one gentleman on King Street that had a filling station, and every year he'd have one or two baby bears in a cage for people to look at, for the tourists to look at.
Wow. I don't think I want to run into a little one or a big one.
Well, there was a lot of turkey in the woods.
The turkey hunting?
We used to go turkey hunting, and we try to outdo each other making turkey sounds. Hunting was not just a sport back when I was growing up. Hunting was putting meat on the table.
Right. You killed what you needed to eat. You didn't.
And in my family, if you caught more fish than you could eat, of course, no refrigeration, no freezing. We salted fish, certain kinds of fish we salted. But it was a ironclad rule in my family that you never wasted anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I brought home more squirrels or more rabbits or more doves than I could eat, I cleaned them and gave them to the neighbors.
Gave it to the neighbors.
That's right.
Did you ever get a wampus cat?
A wampus cat. What do you call one?
I don't know. My grandfather used to always tell us kids those noises in the woods was a wampus cat. And you'd be careful, they would come, and we never saw them, but we passed them
A wampus
along.
cat actually is a panther.
Is that what a wampus
Florida
cat is?
panther. Of course, I imagine your grandfather used to tell you about snipe hunting too.
Oh yeah, that was a big sport. We used to listen to that for hours, and it took us many years to figure out what.
And down at the boatyard, everybody was always sending you for a left-hand monkey wrench and a non-adjustable Stilson wrench. And back in those days, of course, a screwdriver was only one kind of screwdriver, and they was always telling you to go find a Chinese screwdriver that was L-shaped. I guess people just
When they did,
enjoyed
and
the
we're underfoot,
simpler,
they sent you off.
simpler things.
Yeah.
But I feel very fortunate I grew up in St. Augustine. Many of the boys I grew up with were casualties in the war. But there's still quite a few of us around. I went to the 50th reunion of the 41, 42, and 43 classes a year or so ago, and I never saw so many healthy, well-dressed old people in all my life.
So this is from Catalina?
Yeah, from Catalina. There's a few people there from St. Joe.
Oh, yeah.
We had people come in from all over the country.
That's great.
We had, of course, at all reunions you find out who's not alive anymore, which is sad, but it's also nice to see all the older, healthy people. And I did the same thing in the New Smyrna class. I left St. Augustine when I was I was supposed to graduate in 43. I left St. Augustine in 42.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a time in the New Smyrna High School. And I actually went back to their reunion. And it was nice. Actually, I didn't graduate from high school until I was 21 years old. I came back from the Navy, and to please my mother, I went down and got my diploma with the 8th graders.
And your mama was just as proud.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that, it was, I had taken courses in the Navy, and I had more than enough credit. Of course, I really didn't graduate from college until I was 43 years old.
Very good.
I finally got all my junk together and
That's good.
qualified for a degree in business administration.
That's good. Well, you you went down to meet the Myrna for a while. How long did you leave from there to go into the war?
Yes, yes. I was 16 years old Pearl Harbor Day. And December the 7th, my birthday. I also have a son that was born on the anniversary of the invasion of Normandy. But I volunteered before the year was over and went in early. And
Oh, we have a picture here. This is your, what class is this? Oh, I can see AC Masters. That has to be Catalina.
yes, this is
St.
a
Augustine?
this is a picture of the 41, 42, and 43 St. Augustine get together for the graduating class, the 50th anniversary. The teenager in the middle here is Billy Nettles. He makes all of us look old. He still looks like a teenager.
Well, I'd say that's pretty good looking.
Nice looking group, isn't it? No wheelchairs, no crutches. A few hearing aids and toupees.
Toupees. That's pretty good. You could just, look at and call out some of the names for us that you see in there that you know.
Oh, well, let's see. Lillian Fagan is in here, Beatty Fagenbaum. Now, I'm going on original names. I don't know their married names. Billy Hines is in here. God, I don't even remember the names of a lot of these people. Billy Nettles is in here, of course, and his wife. Harry Hurst's in here somewhere, I think. Walter Leonard's in here. Walter F. Leonard's in here. Walter Leonard was my neighbor in Fort Lauderdale for years, and I never knew he lived there until this 50th party. Upchurch is in here. I can't remember all the names. It's hundreds of it. It seems like it's just, and I don't really know any of the girls' married names. LaPrade. Two of the LaPrade girls are in here. Shelley LaPrade sisters. That's about it that I can remember.
I'd say that's pretty good. That's a good sized crowd and a very nice looking house. Where did you have the reunion here in St. Augustine?
They had it out at the hunting lodge out north of the airport.
Oh, God.
And they had the first night was just a get together cocktail party type thing at the down on at the officers club at the
Arsenal?
Arsenal.
Yeah.
And that was a nice part. It was very informal and a lot of people talking and visiting and catching up on who are you and where are you living,
Been living all these
and
years?
where's old Joe and how's Mary, and I'm sorry but they're dead type thing, and they're all right and they're living in Philadelphia. And the next night we had a dinner out at the Hunt Club.
Right. I thought crossed my mind you didn't touch on the subject. What were some of the little cute things you all must have thought of for Halloween? Did you all come up with some cute little things as all?
Well, Halloween used to be, I never did go trick-or-treating. We just used to go tricking.
Somehow I kind of thought of that.
We hung gates on telephone poles, and we rang doorbells, and we did a lot of little things. We put soap on store windows and let the air out of people's car tires. Virgil Stewart, who was a lieutenant in the police force at the time, and pick up a bunch of us that he thought was in the Delphin, take us down and show us the rat-infested jail, to make us behave.
And this jail was on San Marco?
No, this jail
the
was
one
on
outside?
downtown where the Columbia is.
Oh, okay, the city.
The old city
Is
jail.
that right, where the city building was?
Where they had
Yeah.
rats that were about this big.
running around did that straight yellow line.
Yeah, well, yeah, you really didn't want to spend any time. You didn't want to spend any time in Virgil's emporium. Virgil, I understand Virgil ended up retired as chief of police.
Yes, he was chief of police for a while.
And Virgil, when he was very young, worked on one of my dad's freight boats.
Really?
Yeah, when he was a teenager. Uchi Mays was a motorcycle policeman when I was a boy. Of course, he was the originator of Uchi's hot sauce that they sell in St. Augustine now. His son is in the real estate business and is producing Uchi's product, hot sauce, and
Did Itchy
Saddle
May
pepper
have
sauce.
a band or an orchestra or something? One of the names did.
I
I
don't
don't know if it's Itchy May or not. I don't know why that's stuck in their mind.
I don't remember a band.
Did y'all go to a lot of dances back in those days? When you got a little bit older?
We went to a few square dances. We used to go down to a place down on Palisade Creek that is now a furniture store. That was a country when Western, well, it wasn't Western back in those days. It was just country music. Saturday night, Friday night type thing, barbecue, a little illicit moonshine probably, and that sort of thing. And there was a big place out on Masters Drive somewhere that was a big dance place. You gotta understand, most of us, by the time we got to dancing age, we were dancing for the U.S. government.
That's true too. The war had come through about that time.
We were gone. Most of the boys I grew up with, we all joined the service within, a year or so. As soon as very few of the boys I grew up with, I remember registering for the draft.
Back then, that was what you did. Now they may think a little different of it.
Well,
Times
I
have
would
changed.
rather volunteer and choose than I would to get drafted.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I don't think I'm too excited about women being drafted. I'm too old for that, and that's fine
I
with
think
me.
it'd be nice if women got drafted.
Well,
Oh, you should have the same privilege we have.
No, I don't think so. I have a daughter who loves military, and she's in the Guards, and that's fine
Great.
with me.
I think it's great, I think that
So did you move in this area after you, how long have you lived over here?
I lived in Jacksonville after the war. I worked for a title insurance company up there for years, and I was in the sign business up there. And I lived in Jacksonville for a few years. I moved to Orlando from there for a few years. And then I moved to Fort Lauderdale. I was in Fort Lauderdale for about 30 years. No interest in St. Augustine for many years because I was busy with a family and trying to gather up a little money so I could enjoy life. When we decided to leave South Florida for various reasons, one, it was too crowded, and two, we wanted to get away from the hubbub of the big city. We were looking, we had a criteria that we had to have 4 feet of water for the boat, and we wanted on the water, and we'd been on the water, so we wanted on the water, and I couldn't find what I wanted, and so I found this nice canal with access to the river that I used to boat on with my father when I was a boy, freight boat, and we built a little house, and so now I'm within 24 miles of my old homestead, and I got the best of both worlds. I'm on nice fresh water. I can go anywhere on the boat I want to, and
So Well, Mr. Myers, we want to thank you so much for having us over here to your home and sharing all your thoughts with us and memories. And maybe we can come back again and talk sometime.
Anytime. I appreciate your time. I do feel like that St. Augustine still has a lot to offer.
We feel that way, too. Thank you for being with us tonight.